Hi, this is Emily, and this is the M Dash. If this is your first time here, I am so grateful you found your way here. And if you've been on this journey from the beginning with me, thank you so much for coming back. Last week, we talked about how so many of us live life like it's a rehearsal, waiting for the right moment and the right version of ourselves and the right time to finally show up fully. But if life isn't a rehearsal, why do we keep holding back? Today, we're going to talk about vulnerability. And I know for so many, that's a bad word or a word you're not comfortable with. And I think it's because somewhere along the way, we learn to put on armor. Armor protects us from rejection and judgment and hurt. But also, it protects us from connection. Vulnerability is honesty without armor. Vulnerability isn't oversharing. It is letting yourself be seen without the performance. It is the moment you stop editing yourself and show up as you are. When we keep that armor on, we stay in rehearsal mode. We stay polished and guarded and safe, but never fully alive. Taking off the armor doesn't require an audience. You don't need to celebrate. My biggest question that I stumbled upon when I was going through this with myself is, how do we lose vulnerability? We don't start life guarded. We start life open. Children share everything, their thoughts, their feelings, their excitement, their hurt. They trust easily. They love quickly. They speak freely. And you don't have to be a parent to know that. But life begins to teach us protection. All it takes is a moment of embarrassment, a betrayal of your trust, being laughed at, being told you're too sensitive, being told to toughen up. And that hurt teaches us caution. We learn to read rooms. We learn what gets approved and what gets us rejected. And we learn what parts of ourselves feel safer to hide. So we begin to share less, not because we stopped feeling, but because we started protecting. And I want to be clear, protection isn't wrong. It's human. It's how we survive. But what once protected us can quietly become what separates us. Because connection doesn't happen behind armor. It happens when we feel safe enough to soften. Most people hear the word and think immediately of exposure, oversharing, and weakness, or emotional dumping. But what vulnerability actually is so misunderstood. It isn't oversharing. It isn't telling your life to strangers. It isn't emotional spilling without boundaries. It's not about sharing everything. It's about hiding less. It is the courage to be felt. Vulnerability is allowing yourself to be seen honestly and in real time. It's saying that hurt instead of pretending it didn't. It's admitting you don't have it all figured out. It's letting someone see you, not just the polished version. I say that because these are lessons I've learned. And learning what it is beautiful, because it's not weakness. It's courage without the armor. And it's strength that doesn't need performance. Exposure is sharing without safety. Vulnerability is sharing with awareness. There's a difference. Vulnerability doesn't mean telling everything to everyone. It means allowing yourself to be known in safe spaces at a pace that honors your boundaries. because sometimes vulnerability is quiet. It looks like honesty instead of avoidance, presence instead of performance, truth instead of pretending. Being guarded just feels easier because the fear of being misunderstood, rejected, having it used against us, but it can block connection. And then the risk of connection can happen in any type of relationship. Most people just immediately think romantic relationships, but friendships can hurt from this. Family dynamics can hurt from this. Even professional relationships can hurt. But connection does require courage. It isn't hard because we don't understand it. It's hard because it involves emotional risk. And that's where people lean in. When we open up, even just a little, it feels risky. We could be easily dismissed. We could not be met in the same honesty. We could feel like we're losing control of how we're perceived. And then our nervous system reads that as a threat, even when it's emotional, not physical. So we armor up. We keep things tight. We stay surface level. We protect. But here's the deeper truth. Connection requires risk, not reckless risk, not oversharing, but emotional openness. You can't be deeply known while staying completely protected. I had to learn that myself. Because the real risk isn't vulnerability. The real risk is never being known, never being seen, never being met, never experiencing true connection. And that's the quieter loss. In real life, telling someone that hurt your feelings instead of pretending it didn't, admitting you don't have it all figured out. I know I've said that before, but those are two things as adults we don't feel like we have to do anymore, but we should. Telling the truth instead of performing strength, guilty. Allowing silence instead of filling space with armor. Sometimes we fill silence with protection instead of allowing presence. Small moments, big impact. Because Pat's experience taught us being open isn't safe. So we adapted. That adaptation protected us. But protection can become isolation if it's never loosened. And the problem with connection, right, is fear. Because no connection is guaranteed. But neither is loneliness. Avoiding by staying guarded. Risk means you could be hurt. You could be misunderstood. You may be disappointed. But you also open the door to being seen, to being understood, to being loved and supported and known. And that door only opens from the inside. Vulnerability feels so risky because it is. When we open up, we're showing our true colors, and that feels scary. Imagine when you're at a dinner table with people you've never met before, and people are sharing stories of their lives. But you just sit there in silence because you're too afraid to share yours. Or say you're at a business conference, same situation. It doesn't matter where you are. Be open to learning people's stories and understanding where they came from, seeing their humanity, and then adding yours. That's connection. You can stay protected or you can be known. but you rarely get both. When I was writing my book, well, actually, let me back up a second. The night I learned that I was going to publish my book, I should say, because when I say writing my book is my journal over the last 5 years. And there was a storm outside. This is actually in my book. Tornado warning, all the things. But that night, when I was in my room, I realized there was a storm outside, but there was a storm inside me. I have lived my life being the tough girl, afraid, right? Heartbreak, disappointment, job loss, you name it, I've been through it. In fact, I know I'm not the only one. And I realized my entire life, I knew I wanted to be a published author. I just didn't know what I wanted to write. And for my whole life, I thought it was going to be children's books. And who knows, I still could write those. But what I felt was I had a story to tell. And it's not because it's just a story of my life, it's really just my journal and experience that I've had over the last 5 years and the emotions behind those. And that's sharing, that's connection. And that was me taking the heavy coat off and exposing myself and being vulnerable, truly, can't even say the word, right? For the first time. And I wouldn't say the first time, but to me, it was the first time I just dropped all of it because anyone can read my story right now. And it took me until what? I was 47 years old when I published it and then quickly turned 48. But being in my later 40s, feeling the freedom to finally share my story. And this is where I want to connect with you. And you probably hear the emotion behind my voice. But I don't want you to go through your whole life and not share who you authentically are. You know, that it softened me. I felt like at this point, I have nothing to hide. And it's not because I think everyone in America has read my book, but they actually can. And it's not my entire life. Like I said, it's the last 5 years. But it was vulnerable. But to me, it was real. And I just wanted one person to relate, right? And then you hear multiple people relating to it. And that's what vulnerability is. You know, when they say sharing is caring, to me, that's what that is me caring enough to share my experiences to maybe help someone else in theirs. So I say this, you don't need someone's permission to be authentically yourself. You just need the courage to stop hiding from your own life. And the truth is, you never know when one honest moment, one shared truth, one simple me too might change someone's life. Life isn't a rehearsal. You don't need armor, you need presence. And the moment you stop protecting yourself from being seen is the moment you begin to feel alive. You don't need permission to be real. I want to leave you today with some questions for you to think about. And there could be multiple answers, but I encourage you. You can think about it, but I encourage you to pick up a pen and paper and think about this. It can really help. When did you start guarding your heart? What made you feel like you had to protect yourself? Where do you feel safe enough to be real? And what would it feel like to loosen the armor just a little? And I won't leave you today without a blessing. Blessing for living without armor. May you feel safe enough to soften where you once believed you had to stay guarded. May the armor you built to survive gently loosen its grip, not in defeat, but in trust. May you remember that strength is not found in perfection, but in the courage to be seen exactly as you are. May you release the need to rehearse your life and step fully into this moment, unpolished, unguarded, and alive. And may you honesty create space for others to breathe, to soften, and to remember they are not alone. Remember, life isn't a rehearsal. Stop performing and start living. You don't need permission to be real. This is Emily, and this is the M Dash, and you are always welcome here.